I think we'll just begin with an update on what's going on with the US elections. So Biden has apparently won a Georgia recount, which was due today, and I'm sure that this is the case, that after counting the ballots, that the totals are as they are being reported. Brad Raffensperger has come under remarkable pressure from both sides and he's a Republican, but he seems to be at least maintaining a position of neutrality on this. But he claims to have been pressured by Lindsey Graham. He's obviously being pressured by the Democrats. But the results have come in. Trump was 1,400 votes closer to Biden by the end of this. After several batches of votes were discovered, but this wasn't enough to put him over. However, this is still contentious, but we'll get into why in a minute. But
sorry, was this the audit or was this?
This is the audit,
right?
But
because they're calling it the recount in the headline.
Yeah, it is. I'm honestly not sure what they are actually doing at this point, because I'm seeing the words recount and audit being used interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. And Giuliani in his press conference seemed to think that it was just a recount rather than an audit as well. But we'll get into that in a minute. But Raffensperger said Georgia's historic first statewide audit reaffirmed that the state's new secure paper ballot voting system was accurately counted and reported results. This is a credit to the hard work of our county and local elections. Blah 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 blah. And so it seems, from the official figures there, that Trump will have lost Georgia. But I suppose it's worth going on to the Giuliani press conference, because the press conference itself, in my opinion, was pretty good. Rudy Giuliani laid out a lot of good evidence. The problem, I think, that he is having with these press conferences is that he's from a different era dealing with the public and the media. Things have changed in the Trump era. The press have become a partisan activist organization against Trump, and we know because there have been studies that show that something like 90% of all press coverage of Trump is negative. And Giuliani, being on Trump's side, fails to understand that the media are now I think we can, in a kind of malicious compliance mode, where they will just seize on anything. No longer can Rudy Giuliani expect any kind of charitable treatment from the media, and he has a habit of being a human being when he's giving these conferences. Now, what I mean by that is what he really should do when dealing with the media is just come out and give the numbers. Here's the statistics. He shouldn't intersperse his own opinion into it, because the media can take this out of context, try and paint him to look crazy, like he's a conspiracy theorist, like there's absolutely nothing here, and use his effervescences in his delivery to make him look ridiculous to the public, and various other things that we'll get into shortly. But I suppose we can just go for the first clip, because this is Giuliani laying out like some. I've taken the liberty of excerpting certain just factual statements that he's making when reading from the affidavits that he has, and he says that he's got nearly 1,000 of these, with hundreds in each of the contested battleground states. And so this is serious evidence, but we'll let him lay it out.
Counting ballots improperly, counting them 3 and 4 times, having people vote 3 and 4 times, changing and backdating ballots to the point of at least 300,000 illegitimate ballots that we can specifically identify.
This is a consistent pattern of allegations that are being made by the people who make these, who've sworn these statements, and the way that Giuliani has, I think, made mistakes here is that he has been putting moral invective in the delivery of it, which makes it easier for the media to, I don't know, essentially obscure what he's actually saying. But we'll get to the media reaction shortly. But I mean, some of the allegations are staggering. Reading from one of the affidavits, just one of the allegations from a woman who allowed her name to be made public, because this is, and Giuliani points this out in the press conference, this is a dangerous thing to do, because as we saw with Michigan, with the 2 Republicans who rescinded their certification of the election results, who had been harassed, doxxed, threatened, and was like smeared as racists for all time with a stain on their soul. Thankfully, they had the wherewithal to say, actually, this is wrong and we're not going to certify this. We've seen plenty of this happening. There has been a lot of aggression, and Giuliani calls all of this out, but he intersperses it with all of the facts, and so it becomes quite difficult, I think. It was difficult for me going through his previous press conferences to really extract the sort of solid meat, the solid points he'd been making. But we'll let him. I've taken these clips out, so we'll let him do that.
She said that I was instructed by my supervisor to adjust the mailing date of these absentee ballot packages to be dated earlier than when they were actually sent in. The supervisor made that announcement for all workers to engage in that fraudulent practice. That's not me saying that. That's just American citizens saying that under oath. I witnessed election workers and employees going over to the voting booths with voters in order to watch them vote and coach them for whom to vote. Completely illegal. Then she was instructed by my supervisor not to ask for a driver's license or any photo ID when a person was trying to vote. She also said, I observed a large number of people who came to the satellite location to vote in person, but they had already applied for and submitted an absentee ballot. So she observed a lot of people voting twice. I was instructed not to invalidate any ballots and not to look for any deficiency in the ballots. I was instructed not to look at any of the signatures of the absentee ballots. On November 4, 2020, I was instructed to improperly predate the absentee ballots when the receipt date was actually was after November 3rd, 2020. That they took ballots that were marked the 4th and the 5th and the 6th, and they marked it down for the 3rd, in blatant disregard of the order of the United States Supreme Court.
Right. So, each one of those is a crime. It is being alleged happened at the ballot count. I think this was the Michigan one. I can't remember whichever one this was. This, if done by the Trump campaign and alleged by the Democrats, would be front page news on every newspaper all around the world, and everyone would think that Trump had stolen the election.
If what he said first, if that's true, what the woman alleges, that the supervisor instructed everyone on the site to just do that, that if that was true, that would point to something like really big being done, because everyone would have had to have been on it, right? It's not just something that like two people in secret talk about. It's just something that's done in the open at the polling station or something.
And that's exactly what Giuliani says. He says this is a coordinated effort across these 4 districts that all did the same thing. Put like Republicans in like separate rooms or something like this. All these kind of things. It naturally suggests that there is a larger conspiracy at play here, and while Giuliani is right to point that out, I wish he had presented it slightly differently. But like I said, all I've done is taken out the sort of direct input from where he's reading out, and suddenly it seems very clearly and level-headedly. And you can see by the way he's reading it out, he's just like, how am I saying these things and getting no response from the press? This is a scandal that this happened at one place, let alone at like 4 places, and he's got hundreds of sworn statements, all to the same effect, that all say the same thing. So it's like, Christ, there's something really rotten here, and the media's treating Giuliani like he's a lunatic.
Yeah, you said before that it's a shame that he's presenting it like this to the media and to at press conferences, but that would be more or less okay if he presented it differently in court. But yesterday, what we talked about yesterday, it suggests that he talks this way in court as well, which is kind of weird.
Well, again, he's a 70-something-year-old man, 72-year-old man, so But the fact is, it does seem there's plenty of evidence to suggest a huge amount of malfeasance. But you read through one of the affidavits, didn't you?
Yeah, so I got the affidavit for Affidavit for Michigan.
Stop doing the American thing of D'ing the T's.
Oh, well,
don't D the T's, man.
That's what growing up on YouTube will do to you.
I know, it's terrible, isn't it?
I put it in the chat just in case anyone wants to read it on here. We'll put it in the links for the clips. so you can read the whole thing in your own time. But they list, I think it's like maybe 13 different accounts of things going wrong, and then 20 odd affidavits to the specific claims.
Yeah.
And the claims are wild, like he's saying. People being so one guy was getting annoyed because absentee ballots were coming in, and they seemed to be putting random names on them instead of the names of the people they were meant to be. So like we're just giving people who didn't vote a vote just because most of them seemed to vote for Biden. So he wanted to go over and observe what was going on at the polling desk where people are working to make sure that they're putting it next to the books and everything's being done right.
Yeah.
And when he did this, they started complaining that because of COVID, he was too close to the desk, and he's like, "Well, I can't see if I stand 6 feet back, so I've got to stand here and view it." And then they went and got a supervisor, and then kicked him out, and then refused to let him back in to observe stuff. And he's alleging during that time there must have been at least tens of thousands of ballots going through, and our guys couldn't look at them because you kicked us out. I mean, it doesn't seem unreasonable to suggest that that's not right. You shouldn't be able to do that.
Of course.
And then you've got other complaints.
Well, again, like the poll watchers have to be able to watch the counting of the poll, or it's not counting the ballots, or it's not legitimate. Like it's a legal requirement, as I understand it.
Yeah.
So, and as Giuliani promotes it, and I'm sure that he's right. He's a lawyer. I'm sure that he's got a legal team. I'm sure that he's correct. And there are a bunch of different laws in different states as well, because obviously they do vary. And he, again, I'm not going we're not going to go through the entire press conference, but he explains these laws and says, this is just illegal. This is illegal. This is illegal. So there's loads of it.
Yeah, and in this case, in this election, it's kind of made easier for anyone who would want to exclude these people to do so because of the COVID restrictions, so like 6 feet apart and things like that. Yeah, so it's it provides another like angle to use if you want to do that.
Yeah, but there's loads of allegations on here, and it's getting to the we said about you're going after a few thousand or a few hundred votes. That doesn't really matter. So in Michigan, Biden's up by 150,000 was the last reported figure from Real Clear Politics.
Yeah.
And in this, they go into accusations of tens of thousands in different allegations. So you add that up, it would end up being in 100,000 plus.
Oh, yeah.
So this is him actually going after what he needs to go after.
I mean, there was in there, he said, there's something like 300,000 in one state that can be identified to be at least suspect, very highly questionable. And then you've got the arrival of the ballots at 4 a.m., where something like 130-something thousand turn up, and you get the giant spike in the graph that Trump tweeted out, and the poll watchers, the people there, apparently thought that this was food arriving at 4 a.m., so they went out to check, and it was just in rubbish bags and in boxes, just all these ballots. And again, people say, when they, the poll watchers who have sworn these testimonies say, well, we only saw ballots for Biden. They just all seem to be for Biden. Yeah. It's like, this is so unbelievably suspicious. It's just ridiculous.
Do you mind if I read the quote from the affidavit?
Yeah, no, please.
Right, so this is a guy under the penalty of perjury. He said that this is true. The defendant systematically proceeded and counted ballots from voters whose names failed to appear on the qualified voting file. And then, get down. At 4 a.m. on November 4th, tens of thousands of ballots suddenly appeared in the counting room through the back door. These new ballots were brought through to the counting center by vehicles with out-of-state number plates, and it was observed that these new ballots were cast for Joe Biden. So I'm assuming by that he's either saying entirely or majoritively. Yeah. So that's at 4 a.m. And then we have a graph from Trump that he tweeted out accusing them of fraud here.
Well, you can see just the giant
at 6:30, there's a huge count suddenly for Biden. It was 96% of the votes counted for that chunk went to Biden. So I'm assuming that's, the connection between those two allegations. Yeah. Whether or not they're true is a different matter. It's got to be
it's for the courts to decide.
Exactly.
But we've depends how many witnesses they have, whatever other investigations they do.
Yeah, we've got witness testimony under penalty of perjury that this is what happened. Well, you've got to investigate it then. That's not that there's no evidence. It's that there's no proof yet.
Yeah, it's not concrete proof, but it's certainly evidence.
And at the same time, it's under the penalty of perjury, but with these things, you can say that, yes, I believed this to be true, and it turned out not to be true, but I wasn't aware of this, and I said it honestly, and I thought this to be true. And so you will never have, with these things, you will never have anyone actually convicted for perjury just because something turned out not to be true that they had said was.
Oh, you can. I mean, if it seems it's a deliberate lie.
Yeah, sure, but that's very hard to prove, and usually it doesn't happen.
I know, but in these cases, I mean, he's making specific claims about ballots turning up in vehicles with valid state
And it's not just one guy. It's dozens and dozens of people
Like,
at each location.
The
saying
Russia
same
investigation, people being done for perjury because they lied to the FBI and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I imagine it can happen, but you're right. It will be
It probably
a
doesn't
quite high
often
bar.
happen. But the point is, when you've got so many people all alleging basically the same thing, all saying, yeah, we saw all of this dodgy stuff happening on the poll day. Giuliani, is well within his right to be just flame-throwing the media, going, you can say that she's lying if you want, but you can't say this isn't evidence, because people are convicted on this evidence all the time. Like, this is a direct witness statement. This is direct knowledge that the witness has of the event. You can't get better evidence of this. What better evidence are you expecting? Like, what?
I mean, you could find the guy doing it.
I guess a confession, signed confession from the guy who did it would be nice.
Full HD video.
Yeah, exactly. Of him, with a GoPro on his head recording it, maybe that would be wonderful. But like, this is perfectly good evidence, and so it's really insufferable watching the gaslighting that's going on around this, and it seems to be going on everywhere, doesn't it? Like, but before we go on to the media, is there anything else about this that you think is noteworthy? Like any other
about the affidavits?
Yeah, anything else interesting in
I
there?
did put a few down just because the most important ones, because there will be a handful of cases where people are alleging, I wasn't able to see this, or this guy filled in a few. But if it's just a few hundred or whatever, like we've mentioned before, and Ben Shapiro's mentioned, voter fraud is part of elections. It always happens. Yeah. But is it significant enough? So the allegations around tens of thousands of ballots are the ones that are significant. So one guy says here, after election officials announced the last absentee ballots had been received, another batch of unsealed ballots arrived without envelopes, arriving in trays to the polling centre. There were tens of thousands of these absentee ballots, and apparently every ballot that was counted was attributed only to Democratic candidates. I mean, that reminds me a lot of the Birmingham case we were talking about, where they turned up with mail-in ballots.
After a factory was producing them.
Yeah, and they said, we found more ballots, you need to count them. They counted them, overwhelmingly for Labour, and it was just accepted at the time. So is that suspicious? Yeah. Is it proof that it's definitely fraud? No. But you investigate it. You find out what happened there.
I mean, there have been accounts that the ballots are all, freshly pressed and look different to the other ballots, that they've only got the vote for Biden on, they don't have any down ballot votes. Again, all of this being like unusual, considering that most people vote with the down ballot as well, and Biden having like 34% or whatever it was that don't, is really weird, just really unusual. But yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, so it's just a handful of these kind of accusations, trucks turning up with tens of thousands, the guy being kicked out so we couldn't observe tens of thousands, and then this guy claiming that tens of thousands of absentees turned up. Well, you add these up, you do get to the ballpark numbers that we were talking about. So is an investigation unwarranted?
No, not at all. And it casts doubt on all of the other ballots that have been cast. If you're a resident of these states, you would surely demand that the ballots be checked properly, because they might be stealing your votes. Every fraudulent ballot cancels out a true ballot. So I would be furious. I'd be furious about like any of these allegations, to be honest. But all of them at once, I think, is tremendous. It's. I mean, I don't know whether this is the Kraken or not, but I mean, these are staggering allegations.
Certainly looks like a couple of tentacles.
It certainly does. Certainly does. Even though I don't know if the Kraken was actually meant to be an octopus or something. I think it's actually like a big fish monster. But anyway,
it's like a squid, right?
Well, in modern sort of view it is, but originally I don't think it was.
You'd be the one to know.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's what I'm saying.
Should we move on to the
but anyway, if we can play Rudy's last clip, because this is a good one.
We have 100 more of these. I can't show them to you because those people don't want to be harassed. They don't want to have their lives torn apart by the goons on the other side. We don't do that to them. They've done that to a lot of our people. They've done it for 4 years. And it's outrageous that it's tolerated, and it's tolerated because you condone it in the press, and you don't cover it, and you don't condemn it. And it shouldn't happen to a Republican or a Democrat. A lawyer shouldn't have to withdraw from a case because he's representing the President of the United States.
Yeah, so Trump has had other lawyers who have withdrawn from, I think it was Nevada, the lawyer withdrew because of allegations of threats and intimidation and things like this. And, There's also a huge amount of fake news going around as well, just to add this onto the end of this part, because Giuliani said that they've only got 3 lawsuits. They've filed 3 lawsuits. The Trump campaign has filed 3 lawsuits. They have withdrawn 0 of these lawsuits. So what is the press talking about when they say, oh, there have been like 33 been thrown out of courts and things like that? These are from other actors. These are from other agents. These are private citizens or local people charging their local state for fraud and stuff like this. And a bunch of them have been thrown out. I think a few of them haven't. But they're not from the Trump campaign. But the media is not reporting that. The media is giving everyone the impression that literally everything Trump has filed has just been thrown out, which is just not true.
Yeah, I mean, take the one I'm talking about. That's Constantine versus City of Detroit.
Yeah.
That's a private citizen with a bunch of other private citizens suing the City of Detroit for fraudulent practices and not following procedure.
Yep.
It's got nothing to do with the Trump campaign. He speaks about it in that conference where he's like, we haven't coached her, we haven't spoken to her, she's done this on her own, and we think she's credible.